This is the Money Talks podcast with Michael Campbell.
Hey, I'm glad you're with me, but I think I got to warn you that today's going to be challenging because we feature Martin Armstrong, who accolades like the Wall Street Journal's called the highest paid financial advisor in the world, a guy who's been called on by governments, sovereign wealth funds, major pools of capital. And the reason's straightforward. His track record has been brilliant for 40 years. Gosh, I remember predicting 3 years in advance the day of the fall of the Berlin Wall, November 9th, 1989. His Socrates model, predicting way in advance that the last week of January 2020, we would see a major turn in stocks, the economy, society in general, along with predicting that panic would grip the financial markets in the last week of February with a bottom March 23rd. And all of that happened. So today, Martin Armstrong. Plus, we'll talk the Canada Mortgage and Housing's latest real estate predictions and why Ozzie doesn't know whether to laugh or cry. Victor Dare talks about one key factor in the current stock market slowdown that's not being mentioned. And we got a great quote of the week by controversial Dad Sad. Well, by the way, controversial now seems to mean anything that challenges the prevailing narrative of the day. And in doing so, of course, some people get angry. And don't miss both the Goofy Award and the shocking stat. But first, just before I'm joined by Martin Armstrong, let me sum up what Money Talks is about in 40 words. We talk about the declining confidence in government, the demise of the welfare state, and the financial, at times social, consequences, including impacting currencies, stocks, taxes, bonds, real estate, food, home prices, travel costs. In short, your financial well-being. I think it's the key to understanding, whether you like it or not, whether it makes you comfortable or not, that we are living in a period of declining trust and confidence in government. I mean, there's so many ways to measure it. I mean, obviously, that's what the polls are saying. But we also have social unrest. We got protests. We've seen the move out of paper currencies into assets like Bitcoin, real estate, collectibles, and the move away from government bonds and into stocks. And that's played a huge role in propelling stocks to record highs. This is the anti-establishment trend. And I guess it's very difficult for many people, including in the mainstream media and certainly in politics, to understand. That's why they were completely blindsided when Donald Trump won in 2016, blindsided by Brexit, by the Yellow Vest protests in France, by the pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong. You got victories of brand new political parties in France under Macron and Greece under Syriza. I mean, we witnessed the serious decline in confidence in the media and public institutions like universities. I mean, there are a heck of a lot of reasons. But the point to get is that the trend is driving capital. It's moving money, which moves every financial market. Yeah, and Martin Armstrong is controversial. He is definitely not held hostage by the status quo or the narrative of the day. Gosh, I remember when he was on Money Talks in late October 2016, when, against every poll, his model predicted a Trump victory. And I'll tell you, that was not popular with some people. So let me repeat. Before you hear him, he's controversial. But the track record of his Socrates model is undeniable. You know, I first met Marty 40 years ago when he introduced me to the science of modeling. And at that time, Socrates already took into account 33,000 variables, many more now. The key is that Marty understands the interconnected nature of global markets. And maybe that's easier to understand now, given we've just got suffering from a virus from Wuhan, China, impacted the world financially, economic, socially. But come on, it's been obvious for decades. I mean, look at luxury real estate in Vancouver. Exploded because of the influx of capital from China. And why was capital here? Well, they didn't trust the communist government. So when confidence leaves, so does the money. Happening right now in Hong Kong. Certainly, the central banks seem to understand the importance of confidence, which is why they spent hundreds of billions of dollars from September 2019 through today in an effort to stabilize credit markets because lenders had lost confidence in the bond market, including government bonds. I mean, everything the central bankers say, by the way, is to restore confidence. That's why they're saying that inflation is transitory. They can't have us acting if we start knowing that, oh my gosh, inflation's running at 4%. I can go on, but all I'm saying is, and I will in the future, by the way, in future podcasts, but understanding that confidence and declining confidence is a key to your financial well-being. So we'll monitor when politicians lie or don't walk the walk or when their agenda is more in their interest than the public's. monitor everything that erodes the public's confidence, with a focus, by the way, on looking at paper currencies and government bonds. And you can keep with me by joining me on mikesmoneytalks.ca. Sign up for the free email blast. Or you can join me on Twitter on Money Talks Tweets or Facebook at Michael Campbell's Money Talks. And I hope that you tell friends and family where to find us at mikesmoneytalks.ca and every other podcast provider, by the way. Because as I've been saying, some might call it a warning. We're living in an era of historic change, including to the monetary system, which is why I'm most interested to hear what Martin Armstrong and his Socrates model have to say. First of all, Marty, thanks for taking time with us.
Oh, it's always a pleasure, Mike.
So let me just throw a little curveball at you. I want you to, of all the research you're doing, and I know you're writing a great deal. You've got a conference happening, the first week of November down in Orlando, which people can sign on to, by the way, virtually or head down there personally, in person. But give us a headline from the future, for example, that you're going to probably be chatting about at your conference.
Well, I think that we have entered this, vortex of absolute absurdity, but you have simultaneously deflation and inflation. Now, in the economic books, you'll never read about something like that, but this is what's happening. And I'll give you an example. For example, if you're just trying to get somebody to paint your house or something, paint is in such shortage that they can't work. So on the one hand, the cost of paint is rising exponentially, but on the other hand, they can't get it, so they're laying people off. So you're having this crazy situation of deflation and inflation simultaneously. What we're looking at now is it's the time where the financial markets get to vote. So it's the money now internationally votes on who they really have confidence in and who they don't. And those are the movements of capital which can't be rigged. It's way too much. I know a lot of people think there's market manipulations, etc. You can manipulate an individual market within a certain parameter. Granted, you can push gold up or silver or whatever, but you can't change the entire global trend. There's not enough money, in the hands of the most manipulative banks that could ever possibly do that. So now we're at the stage where we have sovereign debt that's collapsing. For the last 10 years, I've been in meetings back and forth with different politicians, and I've been pushing my solution. And on the opposite side of the table has always been Klaus Schwab. And his solution is, okay, fine. We're both saying the same thing in the sense that you can't continue to borrow indefinitely with no intention of ever paying anything back. My solution was basically to handle it like a corporation that was in trouble and refinance it. All right. So we would take the debt and swap it out for coupons that you could use for equity. And government at that stage of ever borrowing again. Schwab basically comes up and just says default on it, create a new currency like this cryptocurrency with its fourth generation that the government can restrict on what we can buy and what we can't, we can sell. And because of the environment, put all these other people out of work and just give them guaranteed basic income because you're also wiping out the pension funds. Most of the pension funds have had restrictions that they had to have government debt. Then you took the interest rate on government debt to negative. It's honestly, it's not that they're devious. They're just too stupid. They don't understand what they're doing. And it's whatever is immediately in front of them, they just do, without any consideration for, gee, what would happen afterwards? I mean, you lower the interest rates to negative, and, oh, okay, that will stimulate, people will borrow. No, they're not going to borrow unless they think there's something to borrow for, and they don't get that. But now you wipe out the pension funds. The ECB has been buying, having to deal with the negative debt since 2014. So this whole economic idea, model, Keynesian, has just completely failed. So it's a very interesting thing. This is the monetary crisis cycle that I've been warning about, and it was coming due in 2021. And that's what all this nonsense is all about. They can no longer continue to fund the governments as it has been up to now.
Well, lots of things coming out of, I got a lot of questions after hearing all that, Marty. And of course, everybody's wondering, okay, so how does that translate? So let me just come back to one thing you said. It's all about the capital flow. It's all about where money's going to go when they have confidence. So let me just jump back to the US dollar. That's where money has been flowing. If you look back, your model successfully called that for a huge number of years. You said when crisis hit, when civil unrest hits, it's all going to come to the US dollar. Is that trend nearly over? Because isn't the Federal Reserve like the biggest sort of creator of money and the financing of $6 trillion in spending, with the big debate over 3.5 trillion still to come?
That's a fair statement. But the Fed has been the least of the problems among some of the central banks. And that's the problem. I would say that people don't realize is that they all pile on the Fed. Oh, this, that, the other. Take a look at all the other central banks. The difference is that the Fed at least has the authority to create the money as it needs it. The ECB does not. The ECB has to go back to Parliament. And so there you have to have all these governments agree. And it's kind of like the chaos you see in Congress right now. It's just trying to get politicians to agree with what's going on. But the dollar at this stage in the game is still the main reservoir for now. That may change by 2023. But just as I'm in Florida right now, and we joke this is the land of the free. If I was up in California or New York, I wouldn't. And last year we had our conference in Orlando, and honestly, we were the only people there. The hotel was like ready to throw rose petals at our feet, like, thank you for coming, But it was the only place in the country you could have a conference. It's just really dramatic. Now, the difference that you have to understand is you go to Europe and Macron or Merkel or whatever, whoever's the head of that state, can shut down the whole country. Biden can't do that. We have 50 states and they are separate, et cetera. Biden, it was a kind of a joke down here in Florida. He was saying he would send in troops to prevent people from going to Florida. And then our governor said he's going to call out the National Guard to protect Floridians against the government. It was just crazy. So that's what we're really looking at.
But we say monetary crisis. I just want you to go a little bit further. Obviously, that's what you're going to be talking about at the conference on November 5th, 6th, and 7th down in Orlando. And as I say, available online also. But tell me more about the monetary crisis. As your model had been predicting coming in, look at 2021, you're now going to start seeing signals much more so in 2022-23. So what is that? Just give me the nutshell what that means.
Well, they're rushing right now, even trying to get some of these cryptocurrency ideas out before end of year. You can go to our site and you'll see I put on the video of the BIS, the head of the Bank of International Settlements, saying that they'll be able to control what you're going to do with your currency, what you can buy and what you can sell. I also put on the site the Bank of England coming back to Parliament saying we need more power to restrict what people can do. So, I mean, when they were selling this, they actually set out, oh, this would be a good thing so parents could restrict the money they give their children so they can't buy candy bars. I mean, okay, fine. That's very nice idea. However, if they can do it, so can basically every politician. But they sell these things, with flowers around them. That's the real problem. So the monetary crisis cycle is effectively trying to change the monetary system, which is what these people are doing. Their idea of going to this cryptocurrency, and I know some people disagree with me, but I believe that Bitcoin, et cetera, was all created by the government. And just ask yourself this: if somebody really created blockchain and everybody's using it, don't they think they would have gone out and patented and demanded some sort of royalty? It's like this, oh, well, I don't know, some Japanese guy did it. It's all very vague. I believe it was created by government for this very purpose. And what they did was, pretty standard. They get it out into the public. Everybody now thinks cryptocurrencies are better than paper. And then at the end of the day, the government comes in and says, okay, fine, it's going to be our cryptocurrency. And then we just seize everybody else's and convert them to ours. But that's the ultimate control. And one of the things in meetings I've had really going back 40 years, it's always this attitude that they would not have a debt problem if we all paid our taxes. It's never them, it's always us. And I've argued, look, if you collected $10, you'd still spend 20. It doesn't matter, what we pay in taxes or whatever, it's endless. They will always continue to spend more. This budget crisis is coming to a head. I spent like a couple hours on the phone the other day with people on both sides of the aisle. All right. And so you now have even conservative Democrats coming up and saying they're not going to vote for $3.5 trillion. That's crazy. 15% of the entire national debt at one go. And they basically have, from what I've been told, the cap is that people would want is 1.5. So, but this is the monetary crisis cycle. They figure if they eliminate paper money and go to some sort of electronic cryptocurrency, then we all have to pay taxes. You can't hide it anymore. You can't put it in a safety deposit box. This is, they wake up at night thinking, oh, where did you hide the money now? This is the way it is. And believe me, I have been in meetings and they have slipped. And some of the really lefties have said it's all their money. They decide on what we're allowed to keep. That's a crazy idea, but that's some of the way the thinking is.
Well, this is why people are sitting and they'll come to the conference for this, but okay, so what do I do as an individual? So if I'm going to be in a paper currency, I still don't mind having US dollars, but I think there's a big puzzle why gold hasn't moved as an example in the environment. And I know it's simplistic to say, gee, the government or the central bank creates a lot of money, the government spends a lot of money, and it's a simplistic relationship to suggest ergo gold must go up because we've got examples when it doesn't. But tell me what you think's happening in gold.
Well, I know that they have gone after refiners. They have to report every gram where it came from and where it's going. It's kind of like cash to them. So they've attacked the gold markets really dramatically. And it's in France. The French try to deal with gold out of Belgium because they can't deal with it in their own country. There used to be a very big ancient coin show. The biggest around was in Paris. And the government walked in and said, you're going to report everybody that comes in to your convention, what they bought and what they sold. That was it. End of convention. But this is how they think. it's hard to imagine, but these people don't look at the implications. They only look at what is in front of them for themselves. And they're destroying the world economy, but they think that they can actually get control of this and then everything will be fine. And it's just not going to happen.
Do you think gold will have its time again? I'm thinking when people lose faith and confidence in, say, the U.S. dollar, also maybe U.S. bonds, other bond market, as obviously has been happening. But I'm just saying, do you think that will be the sort of trigger for a significant rise in gold?
Yes, but the problem with gold, you can't hop on a plane and put it in your pocket anymore. There was a woman from Canada that flew into San Francisco. She had $30,000 worth of gold, and they confiscated. So it's what's happening, and they think it's black market money, and they've used the excuse of funding terrorism and all this kind of stuff. I mean, 6 guys and a camel have changed the whole world, but this is really what's going on. It's gold. I don't think you're going to see gold as this wonderful free market. Abraham Lincoln even shut down the gold market during the Great Civil War because gold would go up every time they would lose a battle. And he thought that was like voting against me, so he shut it down. They shut it down also, during, various periods of war. I mean, Roosevelt, of course, shut it down in which wasn't lifted until 1975. But so they often will attack gold. So you really also have to kind of look at what they won't attack so much. And so you have to kind of look at what it is that they have, and that's usually equities. And that's why the Dow has risen dramatically. I really should just have it framed up. But in 2010, Barron's did an article, and I said, okay, fine, the Dow's going to make new highs. And they did an article like, ha, ha, ha. Yeah, Armstrong saying new highs. And of course, they don't ever come back and say, oh, yeah, well, actually, he was right. But these are important times, and you have to understand most of the ideas of like hyperinflation, the Great Depression, they're just flat or outright propaganda. It was December 1922 when the government, the Weimar Republic, basically came out and confiscated 10% of everybody's assets and handed them bonds, which they eventually defaulted on, of course. But once they did that, that's what was the straw that broke the camel's back. Then after that, nobody did anything anymore. They completely lost all confidence in government. That's when the hyperinflation took place in 1923. So it's like the chicken or the egg. These people that often promote gold, they increased the money supply and therefore was inflation. No, the increase in the money supply was because of the collapse in confidence. Then they print money because they had to fund themselves. So it's the opposite.
Well, let me come with, for example, the Socrates model. I just remember you were at one of the Outlook conferences. This is going back, 5-6 years. And at the Outlook conference, you were saying, I think the Dow was about 18,000. You said it's going to cross 23, then it's going to cross 30. And then we're looking at sort of 40. And then, and as you always point out, so I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you always point out, of course, it's what we're measuring it in. If we're measuring it in whatever, Venezuelan Bolivar, the Dow's at $1 trillion high, so we have to be careful. And I just want to say, but so Socrates has never wavered in, we're in a long-term bull market. From what I'm hearing here is that bull market will continue. I'm saying broad brush. Obviously you'll get corrections within that, but the broad bull market in stocks will continue.
Yes, because it's really the only place to put money. Also, real estate has been um, basically going off the charts in many, usually outside of the urban centers. I can tell you that houses down here in Florida, since everybody's been leaving New York and California, I would say they have tripled within just the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. It's quite, amazing. I know somebody that just bought a house for like $2.5 million, and I thought that was really excessive, but it would cost you more to build it. So, and then a house just 2 doors away just sold for 3.2 in a matter of 6 months. So it's very interesting what's happening, but the inflation and the shortage of supply, like lumber going up and things, has risen so much that the cost to replace some of these houses is far more than what you can actually just buy the house.
Yeah, we've seen that in Canada. What was different is usually the strength in the housing market, maybe Toronto, Vancouver, typical story. Post-pandemic, when they had record low interest rates manipulated by the central banks, we've seen strength right across the country, like every market, obviously to some degree, but it's all double digits and more. So we've had a similar phenomena here, but that brings me to this other side, which is very important. I know you've warned about owning government bonds, and I certainly talk about that a lot. But I think the question is, central banks have been manipulating interest rates, and they've been doing it by buying government bonds, at record low rates, creating money, buying the government bond. Can they do that forever? I mean, how long does that party last?
Well, sure, they can actually continue it because there's no private, sector that's buying it anymore. That's kind of like what's happening in Europe. But it's important to understand that the interest rates are split. If you look in some of the third world countries, interest rates are now starting to rise, even at the central banks. Why? Because they are at a different position than we see in Canada, US, and Europe. Their central banks can't continue to just borrow, buy in debt. So the actual interest rates that you're seeing, for example, mortgage rates, have declined. Why? Mainly because investors are looking at that as the alternative to a 30-year bond. I'd rather have a mortgage where at least I have something tangible, whereas a government bond offers zero. One of our clients is one of the very big hedge, I would say, pension funds. They looked at what I was saying. They did their own analysis, and they started dumping government bonds as much as they could. And S&P walked in and said, gee, you're taking on more risk. And they said, no, look, we follow Armstrong. We double-checked what he's saying, and he's right. The people that default are government, not the private sector. If the government defaults, you get absolutely nothing. You can't go down to the National Gallery and start lifting Picassos, whereas if a private sector defaults, General Motors or something like that, then all the assets are sold, or at least you get something back. You get zero back from a government default. So the smart money is beginning to realize that. So they are moving into corporate mortgage. Mortgages have been okay. And the corporate bonds and equities. So it's what you're seeing in Canada. You don't have a free press anymore. So that is really the capital starting to shift because they don't trust Trudeau, etc. All right. So what do? Well, go into the real estate. Real estate is a very, very big asset class for capital to hide in. And equities is the other one because equities are a little bit better in the sense that you can at least hop on a plane and sell your IBM shares in Shanghai or something. Well, you can't do that with real estate.
Well, let me come to something you also you alluded to just a few minutes ago, but it's been a theme, and that is we were going to get supply shortages. You talked about rising prices in agriculturals when we talked to you about that at the World Outlook Conference and before that also. But you said look for the commodity, the agriculturals to go, look for shortages in commodities. All of that has transpired. And the question is, are we still in a commodity bull market? Like, is that over, or is that still a place to be? Maybe buy on dips, that kind of. And I know it's a broad question, but just the concept.
Yeah, I mean the commodity cycle is going to continue. We have, honestly, I'm not being political, but Biden is, I think he's just a puppet anyhow. But the people pulling the strings are just have this agenda in their mind. They have absolutely zero experience. I mean, here you go. Okay, fine. I'm for climate change, blah, blah, blah. So he immediately takes office and shuts down drilling and things of this nature. Gasoline then starts going up. We go, oh, gee, that's bad because it's politically not good for me. So then he turns to OPEC and asks them to start increasing production. The same thing in Germany. The Russians they're going to have this with the pipeline, etc. Then all of a sudden there's a shortage in gas, and they go back to the Russians and say, gee, could you possibly give us some more? I mean, there is no, I don't know, there's just no expertise. I mean, these people are amazing, but I mean, you take Bill Gates, he dropped out of college. He doesn't have a degree in medicine or anything else. So why is he suddenly our health czar of the world? It's just absurd. It's kind of like, it's like making, Jeffrey Epstein the head of a monastery or something. It's just, we put people in these offices that have no expertise on anything that they do. Most of them are just lawyers. And this is what we get. I mean, it's a complete disaster. And I mean, as you know, I've dealt a lot with governments, and I was even asked to even work in the White House back then under Bush Jr. And I said no. But usually, what it is that the president stands between all these agencies. Okay, so he makes the final decision. So these agencies have, since Bush Jr., they didn't like being told no, like a 2-year-old. So they go, okay, mom says no, I'm going to go to dad, see what he says. And so their dream has been to have a president that's not really a president. He's an absentee guy, and they can do what they want. They don't have to, need permission for everything. This is what Afghanistan, the crisis was about. You had all these agencies doing whatever. Nobody coordinated anything. There wasn't anybody there with rational thought to even come up with it. I mean, I can tell you, they did not like Trump because Trump actually thought being president meant I was in charge of something. When he was first elected and I went down to Washington, they thought it was a fluke. And I heard the same stories that when Ronald Reagan was elected, because he was a governor. All right, they don't like people from outside of Washington. So when Reagan was elected, it was like, oh, we're going to have to train them. When Trump was elected, the same thing was coming out. Oh, we're going to have to train them. They don't like people from outside. They really don't. It's like you're playing in their sandbox and don't mess it up. So that's what we're really kind of looking at. It's just a real mess. Don't expect anything from government that's going to be coherent. There's no great plan. They don't know what they're doing, and it's really running the entire world by the seat of its pants.
Well, that's a perfect lead into me saying, okay, I want to be able to sum up what people should be doing. And again, I'll say, obviously, you're going to be spending 3 days on this in Orlando, Friday night, Saturday, Sunday, coming up, I think November 5th, 6th, and 7th. And again, people can do online, but give me the nutshell in this. So what I'm hearing is I don't want to own government bonds. I don't mind my real estate. I mean, there are other variables. This is very broad strokes I'm speaking here. Gold's time hasn't come yet. Be careful in the cryptocurrency space, because if it does too well, the government's going to take over anyways. And we've seen that in China. I mean, we've just seen it. They've introduced the digital yuan, and presto, all of a sudden crypto's outlawed other than the digital Chinese currency. So, I mean, it's not like we don't have hints of this coming through, which makes it difficult. I mean, there's still a debate how it develops, how it happens, over what time frame, that kind of thing. And I'm still comfortable being in stocks. Is that about right? And I should be a borrower, by the way, too.
Well, if you can borrow at low interest rates.
Yes, low. Yeah.
The stocks are still in a position where we can get a near-term correction. All right. That may prove to be a buying opportunity. We'll take a look at that at the conference. But you have to understand that, what China has done with the crypto is exactly what they are planning to do in the West. All right. So just be careful on that, because they will decide whatever conversion rate. If you got Bitcoin, oh, here you go. This is what you'll get in hours. They're able to track absolutely everything. And the other thing with crypto, and why I thought blockchain was really maybe a plot that they created. If I give you $100 bill, they can see that I gave you 100. They don't know where I got the 100 from. With crypto, they can see where that 100 came from for me all the way back. That's what they like. That's what makes them lick their lips. So I don't, my problem with it is that, they're going to create I would say you're going to see a black market develop. Silver coins will be good.
I got to finish with a couple things that I didn't go over specifically, just because it's in the news. So I promise to let you go, but just give me 2 minutes on oil. Again, the Socrates forecast was this supply shortages, oil and gas, resulting in much higher prices. Is this going to continue?
Yes. I mean, you have to also understand that these people have gone off and tried to restrict the production of fossil fuels and say, we're going to be, alternative. But the alternatives, electric car, that's not here. Okay. You're talking about 2030 to 32. I mean, good luck if you're down here in Florida and there's a hurricane and you got an electric car when you want to try and get away. Further you're going to get is 200 miles. That's it. Then you're going to be hitchhiking. So there isn't enough of a power grid to handle this. So forget the nice thing, we're saving the planet, we're not saving the planet. The question is this is like Dumb and Dumber, really. You cut the supply of those things first, long before you have an alternative. California has cut off construction of new buildings with natural gas, which is one of the cleanest burning things. And it's just insane. It really is insane. It's the most terrible mismanagement I've ever seen. I mean, okay, fine, you cut the fossil fuels when you've already created a grid. All right, but they're doing it backwards. So I don't know if they understand, because when Biden kind of panicked and went to the OECD because gasoline rates were going up too much. So that tends to make me think they didn't understand what they were doing. But normally what would happen in a free market is that the alternatives come in when the price of oil goes up and they've suddenly become cheaper. When oil is down, they are more expensive. So you're not going to get the economy to shift. So it's got to move in that direction. And the way these people have handled the fossil fuels, it's really completely backwards. So yes, you have you still have the risk of oil and gas and things of this nature actually rising, because you also have shortages at this stage in the game on just about everything.
And of course, the implications are everywhere. And again, that's a good flavor of what you're going to be talking about at the 2021 conference down in Orlando. And it's November 5th to 7th. That's what I want to let people know. I'm going to call it the full Marty instead of the full Monty. The full Marty down in Orlando or online. Marty, I want to say thanks so much. By the way, you weren't that cheerful. So I'm going to be thinking like I've done well in my stocks. As Socrates says, still points higher. There is corrections, but still points higher. So at any rate, but it's important to understand what the broad picture is in the context of which we're living and investing. And you've done a great job. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Well, thank you. But also on that note, if I say, here's my fist, I'm going to punch you in the face. Here it comes. Do you just let me punch you in your face, or do you move or block? I mean, it's best to know what is coming. Yes, it's not so optimistic. Okay. But we're in this period of time where government is just collapsing. And that's what we have to deal with. As long as we know it, we understand it, we're not surprised, we don't get punched in the face, and we can still survive for another day.
I appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time. I couldn't agree more with that. Martin Armstrong, you can find him at armstrongeconomics.com. He posts every day. It's free, armstrongeconomics.com. You can belong to Socrates, and it only starts at $14 a month, but you can find it there. Everything you can find. Event details at Orlando, armstrongeconomics.com. Time now for the quote of the week. Gad Saad is a professor of marketing, holder of Concordia University Research Chair in Evolutionary Behavioral Sciences and Darwinian Consumption. He's also advisory fellow at the Center for Inquiry. Gosh, I looked at his YouTube channel. He has millions of views. In recent year, though, he's come into the spotlight and being controversial by arguing that political correctness is limiting the free exchange of ideas on university campuses across the continent. Which brings me to my quote of the week regarding not just the demise of free inquiry at university, but of society as a whole. In quotes, close your eyes and imagine this scenario. A child is taught that his country is racist, imperialist, evil, bigoted. The same child is also taught that science is white supremacy and that we must decolonize knowledge. He's also taught that capitalism is rape. He's also taught that fixed binaries defining biological sex is antiquated science. He's also taught that national borders are racist. He's taught that meritocracy is white supremacy. He's also taught that my truth is more important than the truth. And that's only day one of kindergarten. Now repeat this lesson all the way to his PhD in intersectional feminist epistemology at Wellesley and produce millions of such indoctrinated individuals that then assume leading roles in academia, politics, journalism, the media, Hollywood, high tech, etc. This is how a society implodes. This is how a civilization crumbles. It doesn't happen overnight. It may take 50, 100, 150 years. End of quote. I smiled yesterday when I saw the Federal Reserve saying that the transitory period for inflation is a little longer than they thought. My goodness, the Roman Empire was transitory by their measures because we've seen an increase in price. Costco bumping up their prices, the Dollar Tree saying they're going over $1. It's all part of a much bigger problem. And we've been talking about it with Michael Levy, and I'm going to bring him in now to talk about the shipping problem, difficulty finding truckers, by the way. That's exacerbating the energy problem coming out of Europe. But I want to talk specifically and bring it back to Canada here, Mike. Sort of saw a note that you had sent me earlier in the week. I said, let's talk about this when you said Vancouver's sending empty shipping containers to Asia. I think that's a bit of a shocker. Why don't you explain that?
Well, just wrap your mind around this, Mike. The fact is, containers come in from Asia. They sit here in Vancouver, or they go out. They get loaded with grain. They get loaded with potash. They go back on container ships and go back to Asia. The Port of Vancouver right now is sending back record numbers of empty shipping containers to Asia, not even waiting for them to be filled up and shipped back to China, let's say, but sending them back empty, sending them back just huge numbers in order to put merchandise on them, to get that merchandise back to Canada and the U.S., particularly on the shelves with the busy Christmas season coming up.
Well, we've been hearing about this, is that all of a sudden it's saying, be careful, because people, retailers are ordering stock right now. They don't get it delivered December 20th. They get it in the stores. Well, as we all know, we complain Christmas starts too soon, but they should be starting to get it in the stores soon. So this is amazing, though, that they're sending. Give me an idea of the magnitude. Like, what are we talking, like 100,000 containers going back empty? What?
Well, just to give you an idea, as you say, of the magnitude to the problem, there were the equivalent of 597,443 20-foot containers. That's the kind we see on cargo ships that are in the harbor, the kind we see on trains being moved around. Empty containers exported from Vancouver alone in the first 8 months of this year. That was up just about 90% over last year. So picture it, merchandise coming in, empty containers going out. More than half the containers leaving Vancouver this year have been empty.
It's just mind-blowing. I mean, but we have heard, the problem coming out of Asia, that's boosting prices because shipping prices are up astronomically. God, they'd be dreaming of the day it's only 100% drop. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of as much as from a $2,000 for a container, I'm hearing stories as much as $20,000, for example. It varies because it depends what port we're talking about, what country we're talking about. But the one thing that's consistent is that the price of a container has gone up just dramatically, which, of course, those prices gets passed on. And that's what Costco was talking about.
Absolutely. And the situation is so dire, Mike, that two of the nation's largest retailers, Walmart and Home Depot, are chartering their own ships to retrieve their products, while Amazon is beefing up their fleet of cargo planes, and the likes of Walmart and Target are also air freighting stuff in instead of bringing it by ship. Now, can you imagine the cost difference? You don't have to imagine it. Just go into the stores and see what's going on.
Yeah, good point. Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
And the other thing is, just again to show the magnitude, the time that it takes to ship an item from Asia to the U.S. and Canada has roughly doubled this year. 15 days by air. We say air is overnight. 15 days to secure it and get it on freighters, and by sea, 90 days during the pandemic. So you've got a 3-month turnaround there. Mike, that's huge, and that is so impacting inventory in stores for Christmas, getting it here on time, and the price people are going to have to pay.
And that's the big deal. I mean, this is part of that inflation debate, of course. We've seen prices edge up. I guess we can expect more. But hey, that reminds me, the last few weeks, you've been the good humor man. Thank you for putting a frown on my face today, Mike.
Well, I just had to change things around. Christmas is getting closer, Mike. We've got to be realistic here.
Yeah, there you go. Michael Levy. One of the things I'm most proud of that we've done on Money Talks is talking about the coming commodity boom. We actually had a conference on it in February 2020 before it really started, but we started talking about it about 5 months earlier. And as you heard from Martin Armstrong, he thinks it's going to continue. I wanted to get right down to the ground level, though, right now and talk to Claudia Tornquist, who's the CEO of Kodiak Copper. Claudia, can I just ask you, give me the broad view of you thinking of the top line view of the copper market at this point in terms of consumption, production, that kind of stuff?
Well, my view on copper is very positive. In my mind, there's no doubt that we're in for a sustained period of high copper prices. And why is that? We have, of course, the demand side, and the demand primarily is driven by the green revolution. All these green technologies, all the electrification, whether it's electric cars, solar, wind, all these industries are very copper intensive, much more so than the industries they replace. And obviously, these are very fast growing industries. And that means there's a big demand on the horizon for copper. And then if you look at the other side of the equation, at the supply side, that picture is quite stark. The development pipeline in copper is at an all-time low at the moment. There have only been 4 major discoveries over the last decade, simply because commodity prices have been weak for an extended period of time, and so not much exploration happened. And the result we have now, that there are just not many mines being built, not many discoveries have been made, and pair that with a lot of demand, and there will be a crunch. Goldman Sachs predicts 8 million tons of gap, supply-demand gap, in a market that's not even 25 million tons in total.
Give me not a random question, it's related, but how long does it take, and I know I'm asking a generality, but how long does it take to get a copper mine? If you and I had an idea, we said, okay, let's discover some copper, we got lucky and we did. How long do you get to get into production? I mean, just give me a ballpark.
Well, copper mines are very often large, big elephant mines. Some 30% of copper production is from 10 big mines. So consequently, it takes time to bring a project to fruition and to build a mine. And you're looking at 10 years plus from discovery to when you actually have a producing copper mine.
Wow. So, I mean, and we know renewable demand is going to be there, as we transition. So, I mean, it just shows you the degree to which it's going to be very difficult for the supply to meet the demand, as we do this transition in this place. Again, let me ask you a couple of questions about Kodiak, because again, it's sort of like the on the ground kind of stuff. So you're out there, you guys are exploring right now, you're drilling kind of things. Tell me a little bit about that experience.
Well, Kodiak's main project is the MPD project in southern BC, where we made a discovery that was a real game changer for the company last year. And this year have a large drill program going, 30,000 meters, up to 30,000 meters. So a very active year. And it's certainly been a challenging year for many companies out there with wildfires and drought and all. But we're fortunate, program advancing well. We are on budget and motoring ahead. And we'll still be drilling for another 1 or 2 months until late this autumn.
What's the environment like to raise capital? I would think that, as you described at the outset, and something that we've been big, fans of, is the demand side. Has that made it easier to raise money for projects? Well,
we are fortunate in that we're fully funded for the current work. Last year, on the back of our discovery, just about a year ago, we raised $12.7 million. So that funds all our work this year and well into next year. And I would say in general, at the moment, this is a good place to be, because the markets have been very challenging for junior explorers, not just us. Our share price has held up reasonably well still, but it's just been very difficult. Markets and share prices are low. So at these levels, I would certainly not want to raise any money. But we have lots of news coming, and the market will hopefully improve, and we'll take it from there.
The other thing is Canadian business, or, doing business in Canada. We just had, of course, a Reconciliation Day on September 30th. Are you working with First Nations, and what's that like? That's part of the new reality of doing projects, as you say, you're in southern BC.
That's a very good way of putting it, new reality. Because in the olden days, miners would just go wherever they wanted to build their mine, not really talk to local communities. And we've seen many instances where that really backfired. So really today, the approach is very different. and the whole sort of First Nations and stakeholders, local stakeholder relations, that's a very important part of an explorer's work. In our case, we consult extensively, even though we're still very early stage, with all the First Nations in the area. In our area in southern BC, there are 21 First Nations whom we keep informed, have meetings with, get their input. And it's very important to build these relationships early on and shape the project in a collaborative way so as to not run into problems later on. And that's very much what we're doing. And it's a very constructive relationship. The First Nations in our area in particular, which is a mining area, they really understand their stuff. They are very much in favor and know the economic benefits from a mine and just want it done properly so that the negative impacts on the environment are minimized.
Yeah, interesting. This is a broad question. Maybe you're not allowed to answer it. Is BC an easy place, or Canada in general an easy place to do projects like Kodiak's?
I would say it's easier than many. Mm-hmm. It can sometimes be a bit slow and bureaucratic, permitting and those things. But on the other hand, it's very much an established process. And also the First Nations, they have been involved for a long time, and they know mining, and they know the consultation process. So it's very well established process, and you just have to go through the steps and do it right, and then you can advance with your project and your mine.
It's a fascinating area. It's a metal I love because of what we've been discussing, but it's also a real challenge for all levels of government, as you say, relations with First Nations companies, because we can't afford a 10-year cycle to open up a mine. You know what I mean? If we truly want to do the transition, that's a reality, at least generally in the public, hasn't been acknowledged. So I'm happy to hear things are going well for Kodiak Copper in that regard. And we do appreciate you finding time for us, Claudia.
Thank you. It's a pleasure
Claudia
to be here.
Turnquist is CEO of Kodiak Copper. Kodiak Copper. Time now for this week's shocking stat. I mean, we talked about it with Martin Armstrong, but arguably the biggest economic story in the world right now is energy shortages in China, where blackouts, factory shortages are the result of insufficient supply, with Bloomberg reporting that the central communist government has, in quotes, ordered the country's top state-owned energy companies to secure supplies for this winter at all costs, end of quote. In the UK, gasoline shortages, power outages, also factory shutdowns. I mean, the fear in Europe is of a cold winter and energy prices skyrocketing. I mean, the government's implored coal producers to enhance production. You've got natural gas prices up like 500%, electricity prices in the UK at a 12-year high. In Canada, well, we know this. Gasoline prices up 32.5% in August compared to a year ago. West Texas crude is up 100% from this time last year. Natural gas is about 180% in North America. Coal prices vary around the world, but it's up everywhere, in some places like 250%. I mean, those price increases are shocking. What also will be the sticker shock, as much as those increases are going to be passed along to us as consumers. As you would expect, there are lots of variables involved, but it comes down to not enough supply to meet the demand as the global economy opens up. North America, the heat dome, you remember in the summer. Well, that increased electricity demand, which meant less storage. For example, in Canada, natural gas storage is at a 5-year low. And so a severe winter is going to increase demand, push prices higher. In the UK, they had a big failure of wind power because there was abnormal drop in wind in the North Sea. Well, that created a storage problem for the government in terms of energy. And they've been imploring coal producers to increase supply. I mean, other things are in play, like trucking shortages and shipping bottlenecks. By the way, Europe has the added problem because coal and nuclear have been decommissioned. So there's no backup power in many places. And that brings me to the shocking stat of the week from the International Energy Agency. In 2019, the last complete year of data, 81% of the world's energy supply still came from fossil fuels. And here's the shock. Even if all nations were to fulfill their current climate promises, and that's not a good bet, the International Energy Agency estimates that fossil fuels would still make up 73% of the world's energy needs by 2040. In other words, oil and gas aren't going anywhere. and a lack of investment in the new production, as I was talking about with Martin Armstrong, is going to continue to put upward pressure on prices. Well, CMHC was at it again this week. I mean, they've been a lot of fun during the pandemic, especially with their prognostications, forecasts about what's happening in real estate. But this one is a little confusing, saying that Vancouver is the least vulnerable market, and they went back east for the most vulnerable markets. I got to bring in Ozzie Jurek to help make sense of this, maybe get a little feel for what's going on the ground. Ozzie, I know you saw the report, but come on, that is puzzling. People look at the record high prices in Vancouver and go, what? Isn't debt the big problem here? Isn't that where the vulnerability comes?
Well, yes, of course, CMHC has a sparkling record. I mean, first of all, it's good to have an organization that insures our mortgages. That probably makes us for a much more stable mortgage market. But they come out with these dramatic forecasts. 2 years ago, you and I talked on the radio about they're forecasting an 18% decline in real estate. They said that the mortgages would be in default, when really what they meant was that the ability to stop payments for 6 months would come to an end, and so on. Well, now they came out this week and they said that, well, the housing market is far beyond what's warranted by the development of the activities and the prices. And the crazy thing is that they're saying that they have these ratios of moderate, medium, and to dramatically high. And they felt that high was Hamilton, Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, Moncton, and Halifax, whereas Edmonton and Calgary would be medium, as well as Victoria. But Vancouver was the only city there where the risk was low. And Michael, that is really unbelievable, because let's face it, I understand why they're saying it. They say we have a lot of volume maybe declining, but we also have listings declining. So people are rushing out, and multiple offers are back. We had one of our guys, Brent Roberts, he had a deal with 24 offers to close. So the market is very hot because there's no product. But that to me is much more dangerous than some of the other markets that were mentioned.
Yeah, and as I say, I mean, I'm always like, let's manage our risk here. So I'm always looking at, as you say, the supply side, but I'm looking at what the price and what the size of mortgages are and that kind of thing. And I think it's a market that's been primarily driven by record low mortgage rates, have got people up. But when you see like an average home price of $1.8 million in Greater Vancouver, I would think that's where the risk is.
Yeah, it's actually 1.92, and the new rate. The new numbers that are coming out this weekend, I would think that we have seen an increase in volume, a decrease in listings again, and the market will continue like that for a while. So we live in interesting times. The inflation is very visible. It isn't just in the shipping containers. It is anybody goes shopping. In my Ozbuzz, I have a common bear index, and the common bear is double where it was 3 years ago. Anybody going shopping knows that inflation is far more dramatic than the 2% official, well, now 4% admitted to the rates. And so we think that the pressure is going to continue. As I say, it's to me, it's all about where the mortgage rates are. I mean, obviously, there's other factors. I don't want to oversimplify to that degree, but the number one driving factor has been these record low mortgage rates. In the States, for example, you still got the Federal Reserve buying about $30 billion a month worth of mortgage-backed securities. So that's what I'm watching. I mean, for me, Ozzie, I look at that 5-year bond rate, for example. If it starts going up with some significance, that will bump up mortgage rates. Then I'll have a look at activity. No question. And, everybody thinks, well, rates are low and the government can keep rates low. But the mortgage rates are actually tied to the bond rates. And if the bond rates rise, the 10-year went up almost 0.4% this week. The black swan is higher interest rates. And while everybody is forecasting them to stay low, and while it's logical to think that governments don't want to raise rates because the costs are going to go up, maybe won't have a choice. Maybe they'll be forced to raise rates. And that, to me, is the black swan that could really hurt us in the housing market. Well, we'll be here to chronicle it, but I want to say just one more thing. And by the way, I should have mentioned it with Michael Levy, that Michael and Robert Levy and Border Gold have been major supporters of Special Olympics no matter what. And so is Ozzie Jurek. You bring your friends in. You were the best polar plunge partner I could have imagined. But there again, we had our tournament this past Wednesday in Vancouver for Special Olympics BC.
and by the way, it was a dreadful day. It could be worse. We had worse, but it was not the most pleasant day. I don't think there was a soul who would have played golf and woke up that morning going, let's go out and play golf, because it could be cold and rainy. And it was cold and rainy. But I just want people to know that Ozzie has been with us nonstop. Our whole Money Talks team with Grant Longhurst and Nina Parente just did an absolutely fabulous job supporting. And I bring that up for a few reasons, but one is, and many, our whole Money Talks team. Look at Victor doing the golf tournament at Oceanside in Parksville, and also been there for years, as you have, Ozzie. And I just think this is the best part of Canada. We hear an awful lot about what's wrong with Canada. This is the best part. We talk about being inclusive. Well, I'll tell you, people with intellectual disabilities are not included far too often, are not top of mind. Government do not take them into account. And they didn't. I could give several incidences, but I don't want to go too far into the negative. I want to be the positive. All the people who came out and supported Special O, as I say, on Wednesday, and it wasn't a pleasant day, but including Ozzie and his friends. And the highlight for me was that Ozzie didn't hit a spectator. That is, we had the sigh of relief throughout the course was unbelievable when he arrived back at the clubhouse.
Yeah, well, and I want you to remember something, Mike. The sex and golf are the only things in life that you can enjoy without being good at it. What did
you know? How do you know that? Wait, I know you're not that good a golfer, but come on. Let's leave it there on a family show. Ozzie, have a great weekend. Go to ozbuzz.ca. So much to talk about. Interesting stuff Martin Armstrong brought up, but I want to get Victor Adair's take as we go live to the trading desk. Vic, I want to start with stocks. I mean, we are down from the September highs. Looks like NASDAQ's suffering a little bit more. Give us your take on what's going on in the stock market.
I think, Mike, what it is the stock market was overdue for a correction. We were up over 100% from where we were at the lows of last year. We've had massive retail capital flowing into the stock market. You've seen all kinds of, call it runaway speculation, whether it's in meme stocks or different markets. Baseball cards, you've referenced, things have been bid up. These are signs of a market that's maybe a little frothy. And, we've corrected, let's call it 5 to 6%. It's not as though, that the market tumbled to zero. And in particular, the market's not monolithic anymore. I mean, the Dow Jones is one thing, the NASDAQ is something else, and then we get the small caps and so on. But one of the things I think we've really seen here with particularly longer term interest rates increasing the last 2 weeks is there's been a rotation in the stock market. In a really general way, we've gone from money being heavily invested in big cap tech, let's call that growth stocks, and now we're seeing value catch up on that. The big cap tech stocks were extra tied or extra vulnerable to what long-term interest rates were doing. So as bond prices dropped here, interest rates went up. We had this rotation where capital was going from one thing to another. A term you've used before, you've called it the inside of the stock market. Well, that's a Stanley Druckenmiller term, so you know what I'm talking about there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great point you're bringing up. People have to understand it isn't monolithic in the same way it was. We are seeing, we have some sharp corrections in some decent stocks, quality stocks, and you've got others not faring as poorly. So I think that's a great point to make. But I want to jump also to the energy sector. I talked about that in the shocking stat, of course, but still, it's got to be maybe the story of the week when people are starting to notice shortages in the UK, China, especially when you've got factory shutdowns, and them saying, hey, why don't you go out and get some energy for storage and pay whatever you need to? I mean, that has an impact on the market for sure.
Well, to put a level on it, I mean, natural gas prices in the UK and in Europe are 5 times what they were a year ago. And the increase has really taken off here the last couple of months. There are gasoline shortages at the pump, and that's gasoline as opposed different from natural gas, where the people in England are wondering if they go down to the gas station if you can get gas in your car. That's worrying. Now, the big jump in nat gas has pushed up the price of electricity. So energy costs throughout Europe are high. And again, it goes, you were referencing earlier about, the supply shortages and that sort of thing, the supply chains breaking down. That's certainly part of it. China has had rolling blackouts, rolling brownouts. Just yesterday, or what was it, Thursday, I guess, the government there said to the suppliers, it doesn't matter what you have to pay, just go get the stuff. We don't want to have any more of this. So we are seeing the energy complex prices are strong, and that drifts through, I guess, to the broad commodity indices. With energy prices up, broad commodity markets are, we're basically at 7-year highs here on the leading indices.
Let me come back to interest rates. I think I should have said that's a very key what you're saying, because I want to come back to interest rates because, as you said, you're starting to see bond yields sort of bump up. And again, the ripple effect could be in stocks, into obviously the bond market. So it's important.
Well, as I said, two of the main drivers to the stock market have been easy monetary policy and government stimulus. Easy monetary policy, here's one way to express it. I mean, we know that the Fed has been buying $120 billion worth of paper every month. That's bonds and stocks. But you go around the world and you add up all the key central banks, the number is $300 billion a month. Now, the banks around the world, particularly the Fed, are showing signs of they want to start to back away from this. Well, if they're going to back away, who's going to buy the bonds? So I think that's what the bond market is looking at. They see a never-ending supply of debt coming. Somebody's got to buy it, so they're marking the prices down.
What are you going to be watching for? What's on your radar to finish off here?
Well, the U.S. dollar hit a 1-year high this week. That's pretty important to me. I think maybe I've actually position I've got on right now. I'm long of the Australian dollar. I'm always kind of skeptical when the market sentiment gets too strong one way or the other. The speculators in the Australian dollar are absolutely the most short they've ever been. And I think, okay, I'm willing to take a bet against that. They're seeing just horrible relationships between Australia and China, for instance. So that's one thing I'm watching. And I think maybe very short term, the pressure on the stock market is probably a little overdone, and maybe we get a little bit more of a bounce. I was short stocks this week. I covered, Mike, I covered because I need to go traveling. I went and picked a puppy. And I didn't want to have the market on my mind while I was doing that. So right now, I'm looking for Australia to maybe have a bounce. Canada might also. And I think the stock market sell-off here, the strength of it might, we might get a bit of a reversal going into the first week of October.
Well, we'll keep a close eye. You'll be busy with a new puppy, but we'll be watching victoradair.ca, victoradair.ca. Thanks again, Vic. We'll talk next week.
Thanks, Mike.
Time now for this week's Goofy Award. A week ago, we heard the glorious news, it was after the show, that after 1,000+ days, Michael Kovrig, Michael Spavar were being released after being held hostage in solitary confinement in windowless cells. Of course, their release came hours after Ming Wanzhou had signed a deferred prosecution agreement with the U.S., which was always available to her, by the way, and in which she admitted most of what she was accused of, but she was on a plane to Canada. Presto, the two Michaels were released. In the aftermath of the release, Foreign Affairs Minister Marc Garneau said Canada's eyes are wide open. You know what? That reminded me of former ambassador to China, John McCallum. He stated this 4 years ago in September 2017, in quotes, "We want to pursue stronger ties with China, but with our eyes wide open." I mean, Foreign Affairs Minister, really? Our eyes wide open with the release of the two Michaels? Is that what it took? Because that's goofy. Not the clear warnings of CSIS, though, not the Canadian military, along with the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, that China is the principal threat to Canada's national security. They got espionage, foreign influence. They just interceded in our election and interfered. We got cyber threats. Are you kidding? But now our eyes are wide open. Not the genocide of the Uyghurs, not the breaking of the Hong Kong one country, two systems international agreement, and the immediate arrest of all the pro-democracy advocates, suspension of other civil liberties. That wasn't an eye-opener? Or the COVID lies and the destroying of pandemic-related evidence, or not the documented threats by communists against Canadian citizens. 120 tips daily the RCMP gets alleging clandestine activities by the Communist Party agents in Canada. None of them were eye-opening? Really? The biggest human rights abuser on the planet? And it took the release of 2 Canadian hostages to open the Liberal government's eyes? Wow. I'll just say this. Our partners in the Five Eyes intelligence network, well, they've sure known. But then again, maybe that's why the UK, US, Australia didn't even discuss their latest security agreement with Canada. It's more like everyone else knew about Chinese threat to Canada. Maybe that's why we're the only ones to have not banned Huawei from building Canada's 5G network, given, really, by Chinese law, Huawei is, in quotes, must support, assist, and cooperate with the state intelligence work. The Pentagon lists Huawei as the top 20 companies owned by the Chinese military, but we're still not so sure. As top journalist Terry Glavin states, no matter how far the relationship with Communist China drags Canada away from its traditional allies and Five Eyes intelligence partners, Ottawa's singular focus has been on avoiding hard questions, keeping quiet, hoping nobody notices. So are our eyes finally open to what China's about? Did it really take the release of 2 Canadian hostages to see the Chinese Communist government for the authoritarian, untrustworthy, human rights abuser that it is? I guess we'll see. But you know what? I don't think I'm going to hold my breath. That's all the time we have this week, but I got to finish with this again. A big thank you to everyone who supported us at the Special Olympics golf tournament. All my friends at High Performance, the various people like Michael Levy, Ozzie Jurek, Victor Dare, my regulars, but Andrew Rulin, so many other people, Eamon Piercy, who's been one of the, Joseph Schachter. The list is a long one, and the list includes all of the people who took the time to donate auction items, took the time to bid on the auction, because I'll tell you this, you're making a difference to a group that is largely overlooked, and they have been overlooked during the pandemic. You can't come up with one thing that tells me where they separated the health concerns regarding people with intellectual disabilities and did anything to address that, given that those people are 8 times more likely to suffer a severe reaction, and it's because of comorbidities. But my point is, this is the good part about Canada, when people take a moment, think about others, and in this case, help support us with Special Olympics. So my sincere thanks.
Subscribe to the Money Talks with Michael Campbell podcast for free at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or anywhere you get your on-demand audio. For the complete show, daily podcasts, and more.